Hello and welcome to KnightHunter Books. We have a bit of a different setup behind us. As some of you may have seen on Twitter, we seem to have accidentally started the process of buying a new house. Don't just go see houses for fun. It's a bad idea.
That's not the disruptive bit. The disruptive bit is that we're planning to sell this house as well, which means it needs to be pretty and impractical.
Yes. So our filming room now looks more like a kind of bedroom office space. So you might see slightly less videos from us in the coming weeks, but we thought we'd try and wrap up February's books at least before we forgot what we thought of them.
First up is The Woken Gods by Gwenda. This is a YA that I picked up, I think, quite a long time ago, featuring an alternate reality Washington DC after the gods have awoken. And I do mean the gods, all of them. This is a pretty standard kind of YA adventure, but pretty well done. It's enjoyable, but not one I'd necessarily seek out. I'm certainly not planning to seek out the sequel.
A book next which we both read, sort of, this month. This was one of those books which I read to John in the car when we were doing long journeys. It's The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury, and I'd say it's pretty much a short story collection, although I think it's more sold as a novel, mosaic novel. There is a story that bookends all of the short stories within it, but I found that story I'd forgotten really by the point I was halfway in. It's only really a couple of pages at the start. It doesn't get revisited.
There's no callbacks, there's no links between the stories. It's a short story collection.
Yeah. And those short stories were middly?
Very much of their time.
Yeah, so some of them had some nice original ideas, but equally they were a bit samey. They kind of spanned sci-fi and horror, but all of the protagonists could have been pretty much the same person, and yet they were quite 50s. There were a lot of stereotypes in this that I think are quite obvious to us now. However, I did quite enjoy the writing style, and I found it quite easy to kind of read along with. So, yeah, it was so-so. 3 stars?
I think I picked it up for £2.50, which I think is fair.
But I think I might not be reading any more Ray Bradbury, because I've read 3 of his books and they're all been disappointing to me. Like, not above 3.5 stars. So, woohoo! Less books to read in the world.
Next up is She Is Not Invisible by Sedgwick, who blurbed actually the previous book. This is a YA book following a young girl who is convinced that her father is in trouble and goes to New York to try and save him. The twist being that she is blind and she is basically using her 6-year-old brother as a relatively intelligent seeing eye dog. It's pacey, though the interspersed bits about the nature of reality and coincidence are a bit info-dumpy. If I wanted to read something about that I knew accurately reflected the experience of a blind teenager, particularly a blind teenage girl, I'm not sure a book by a middle-aged bloke would be the way to go.
The book that I spent most of this month reading is Let the Right One In by Ajvide Lindqvist, which is a book that we've had on our TBR shelf for a really long time, and
2012.
Yeah, probably 2012. And this is very much a modern classic of the horror genre. I'm not one that usually reads horror. This for me was a little bit on the creepy side. Very dark, very creepy. That's probably what it was trying to do, so I can't say that it was a bad horror book. It probably was a very good one, but I struggled to read very much of it at once. This was very much a dip into and then put it down when I felt like it was getting a bit heavy. Not a nice, easy distraction from the world. So this is a vampire book, but one that is a bit different. It follows a young boy, Oscar, who is getting bullied at school really quite horribly. It's set in a poor suburb of Stockholm, and actually that was quite interesting in and of itself, just seeing people struggling in Sweden. In international news you see so much about it being the perfect place, but this book is rife with domestic abuse, alcoholism, paedophilia, crime, murder, all of that.
And not all of it committed by the vampire.
And not all of it committed by the vampire. So the vampire is a young girl, and she befriends Oscar, and I really liked seeing that relationship grow. I mean, it is a disturbing relationship, but it felt quite real and quite believable. However, a lot of this book does then also jump between different points of view of other people in the suburb, and I think that's where it felt like it was a bit slow. For me, it could have done with some editing. I didn't really care about those characters. It took me quite a long time to work out which ones were which. So yeah, I rated this 3.25 stars, so that makes it sound very middly, but I think it's probably, but it's quite an extreme book, so I wouldn't say my feelings towards it are middly at all. There are some really original ideas in there and some really great relationships and characters, but equally it was a bit dark for my taste at times and a bit slow.
A small book now, obscure, that you've probably never heard of, Life of Pi by Yann Martel, which I've been putting off for ages because I thought it was really, really literary. Turns out it's literary with the training wheels on. It's great. At the start of the book it tells you this is what the book's going to be about, and then at the end of the book there's a bit at the sort of end of the framing story that goes, that story we've just been told by our unreliable narrator could be about this, or it could be this other version that he also told us, and, reflects on what the difference is between the two stories and which they prefer to believe. It's like, oh, that ties exactly into what they said it was going to be at the start of the book. The core of the book is about a boy that believes himself to be a man in a lifeboat with a tiger for a very long time. As you'd imagine, this is not exactly a restful leisure ride across the Pacific. The protagonist is charming, has a vocabulary and attention to detail that you wouldn't normally expect of a 16-year-old. He's more a kind of John Green style teenager. On the other hand, the story is being narrated by him when he's much older, telling a story of his past. So a certain amount of linguistic drift is inevitable. It's really fast paced. I read it in one sitting. Read it sooner than I did.
The last thing I read in February, and by far my favourite, is Strong Female Protagonist Volume 2 by Brennan, Mulligan and illustrated by Ostertag. I read the first volume of this back in January and really liked it. I rated it 4.25 stars. This I think I slightly prefer and rated it 4.5 stars, so we're getting into really good territory here. This is a collected webcomic, so I think this was published kind of through a Kickstarter campaign. This campaign seemed to have a bit more money because it's all in colour, which is very exciting. So this follows a young girl kind of going to college who has been a superhero through her teens, but has now come to the realisation that punching things does not make the world better. What I particularly enjoyed about this volume is that she really matures in her thinking, and after seeing a few examples of how different people have tried to improve the world in the first book, this is where I think she starts to really tackle the philosophical elements of trying to make a difference, and also starts to get her hands dirty, which is quite fun. There's a character introduced in this who is her new philosophy professor, who I kind of really love. He's an asshole, but she knows it and he's great. Would really recommend it if you can get your hands on it as one of these. If not, then we'll put the link to the webcomic down below.
The webcomic has hit a hiatus and they're waiting to publish the last chapter online before they do the Kickstarter for the final paper volume. So it might be a while before you get the rest of the story.
No. That'll be a reread in a few years. But I mean, it's all as you'd expect from kind of graphic works. They're relatively self-contained chapters, and although I really want to see where she's going to go next, it's not like there's a big cliffhanger at the end.
My next one is a short story collection, one that I enjoyed rather more than the Bradbury. The Djinn Falls in Love, edited by Mahvesh Murad and Shurin. This is quite a varied collection, but I would say that all the stories are at least worth your time, and I found a couple of authors that I will be paying more attention to in future. While they're all about Djinn, they vary hugely, some of them being sci-fi, some of them being historical, and you've got contemporary, almost what you might call urban fantasy as well. Some of these are really affecting. A couple made me cry, which I always think is impressive with a short story.
So those were the works that we read in February, which I think was a fair bit of reading, but I still feel like I've had a below average rating year so far. So I'm quite excited about March, when we are going away for a week and we'll hopefully get some reading done, and we're going to try and read some more current books that might end up going towards Hugo nominations. Let us know if you've read any of these, if you have any thoughts on them, and how your reading went in February. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon.
But probably not that soon.
Yeah, maybe not that soon.